time is now 7 o'clock. We will call the, let me see what date it is, May 16th, 2022 Special Board of Education meeting to order. We have an agenda before us. Is there any issue? Are there any issues with the agenda as presented? If not, if there's no objection, we'll pass the agenda by unanimous consent.
So we want to do a roll call.
Oh, yeah, got you. Yes, we got to go back and do that first. I'm getting ahead of myself. Ms. Greer, please call the roll.
Copeland. Here. Elvin.
Here.
Goodfriend. Hoda.
Here.
Klein. Lunkins.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Goodfriend.
Present.
Okay. Moving forward to the agenda, approval of the agenda, I'm sorry. Is there any issue with the agenda as presented? Seeing none, if there are no objections, we'll pass by unanimous consent. Any objections to doing so? Seeing none, the agenda is hereby passed by unanimous consent. And our next item is a presentation, Superintendent Search first round interview finalist. And our finalist today is Dr. Carla Postel. Good evening.
Good evening.
On behalf of the Board of Education of Oak Park Schools, I'd like to welcome Carla Postel back for this, Dr. Carla Postel back for the second round interview. Dr. Postel is currently the Director of Curriculum Integration and Instruction for Hazel Park Schools in Hazel Park, Michigan. I'll take a few minutes to describe the format. The interview may take up to 90 minutes in total. It'll begin with a presentation on the topic provided by the board. Following your presentation, there will be 18 questions. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions of the board and make closing remarks. We will indicate if time is becoming an issue and if there's a need to pick up the pace of the responses. Audience feedback may be submitted by using the form provided for this purpose on our website under the Superintendent Search tab, or by using your camera function on the half sheet of paper in the back of the room using that QR code. And so those are the opportunities, those are the ways in which the audience can provide feedback, and we would welcome all feedback. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the board, as the elected representatives of our community, we value and consider the input of our stakeholders in the process. Dr. Postel, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
You may begin your presentation on the following topic. How would you increase consistent student and staff attendance after 2 years of COVID disruption and learning loss?
All righty, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I can just get right to it?
Go for
Okay,
it.
I'm timing myself too. So
Go forth and comment.
I'm ready. I've had a full day, so I'm energized and ready.
All right.
So as we hear, if everyone can direct, I know we have in the audience, if you want to position yourself to take a look at the presentation. What we have here is the comeback. And it's a lot behind the comeback. Cultivating a community of learning and growth. And for those of you in the audience, this is just a little bit about me. At the board here, we had an opportunity to meet and share some of these things last week. So I'll give a minute, seconds to take a look at that. And then just to get right to it, here's the question at hand. How would you increase, as you stated before, consistent student and staff attendance after 2 years of COVID disruption and learning loss? As I share on the way out at the end of my presentation on Wednesday, the 90-day plan, this is a recap of the 90-day plan, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is part of this 90-day plan. These steps that I would take within the first 90 days are what I would be taking to dig into the question at hand. And so why the comeback? Some of you may have heard, maybe some not, but the comeback is always stronger than the setback. And the setback, as we know, was COVID. And what I have here are some of the things about why I position myself to title this The Comeback. We all experienced COVID, and with COVID coming back and returning to school, we had no idea what we were going to be presented with. No one knew. Everyone was going to be presented a fresh start with what school or schooling looked like. And so now we are here in our next normal, and I like to use next, oftentimes we hear new normal, but that's almost as if we're passing judgment in my mind when we have language like that, so we have to be intentional with our language, but that's another conversation. So I say our next normal, what we are going to be moving forward next in education. So with that being said, we have a chance for new beginnings with the comeback, talking about that attendance for staff and students. And why the comeback is because we need you to come back, literally, as far as attendance, staff and students, those that are present, but when I say present, present being enrolled in the district, but maybe haven't come to school on a regular basis, or those that are not in Oak Park schools, but we would like for them to come back. This is a chance for the comeback to renew, reboot, and be recharged for the new school year. And as you all already have and know, to come back to get the new Oak Park advantage. Now, what I didn't add up there is me. I would love to have the opportunity to come back as well to a place that helped me start my career in education. So the first goal here would be for me to dive into the data, to actually take a look at what the data is saying. And when I say dive into the data, meaning looking at the data from 2018, 2019, because that was the last full school year that we had as we knew it in the past, and then look at the attendance data now. However, I would be careful to say that the attendance data now is not comparison to 2018. It's not apples to apples, because as you know, or some may not, that are looking or listening, that the way we took attendance over COVID was not the same way we took attendance before. So participation and things like that counted for attendance, and that wasn't necessarily the case before. You needed to be present. So you still want to be able to look at the data, past and current. But the reality is, moving into this 22-23 school year, this is where we will begin to develop our baseline data. Because, as you know, or maybe not, they have projected that the next 2 to 5 years is really what we're going to need to recover or restore from what we've just experienced. So with that being said, when we start this year, this would be the baseline data that we would be using this year, and I would say the next year, the next couple of years, to develop our baseline of what attendance is, because you really don't have, a baseline from what we are, or our next normal, what school is like now. Goal number 2 would then be for me to build relationships, and if you had an opportunity to look at my 90-day plan, the listen and learn is where I would be out, be visible, talking to stakeholders in the community, building those relationships, meeting with a group of students, as I did today, teachers and staff, as I did today as well, but of course it'll be more at hand, administrators, parents, community members. You want to make sure that there's a connection with the civic leaders, the public safety, business owners, to get an idea or view about the question at hand in regards to attendance and what they felt like, all of these groups, as to why it was either a barrier for them to return to school on a regular basis or work. Goal number 3 would then be for me, after meeting with those stakeholders groups, is to do just this, to listen and learn. As you saw, that was one of my goals in the plan. My goal would be during these stakeholders group to listen and learn, to find out the concerns and barriers that prohibited staff and students from being able to attend school and work on a regular basis, if at all. And from those opportunities to meet, I would use these guiding questions, which the first 3 are always guiding questions that I use when meeting with stakeholders groups, about asking what is working well, what needs to be changed, and how can we best work together to realize the change for need. But because we're specifically talking about the barriers that may have been in place to cause for people not to come to school during or our return from COVID, that question will be posed up there. Now, I do want to kind of quickly highlight that during this time, it's important to make sure that when you're meeting with the groups, depending on if it's staff and admin like today, those could potentially be mixed, but you want to make sure that the groups are kind of pure, because that allows for people to have focused responses as to what the barriers would be for them, meaning like a student versus a staff member. Once I meet with all of those groups, then the responsibility would be for me to identify the common themes. What did I hear consistently through meeting with those groups? And that would lead me to this, which is what I've had experience in doing pre-COVID, which is building an attendance team. Because the reality, and I think someone said this before we talked about it, that attendance has always been a problem in schools across the country. It's just that COVID helped to lift things. A lot of issues that we have in schools now, COVID helped to shine a spotlight on those issues. So in my experience, as I go through these, I'll talk a little bit about what I had to do in regards to building an attendance team in Hazel Park, because we had attendance issues not so much as it is like with COVID, but we had to focus on attendance. What we would need to do is develop a team of members from all of those stakeholder groups, from students all the way down to the list that I had before, and establish what the priorities are from those common themes. So I said I would identify the common themes. We would then need to identify from those themes what would be our priorities that we're going to tackle and focus moving forward in the upcoming school year. Because again, this is the year that you want to start to have your baseline data. And I talked all today about solution-based. I'm very solution-based. It's okay to have concerns, complaints, and all those other things, but this group will be tasked with, when you come with those concerns and what we're going to look at, we need to make sure that we have solutions to those concerns, and they will be rooted in research as we come up with what it is that we are going to do. Then we would devise a plan based on that theme as to what we're going to do. And so before I go into the last one, I'll talk briefly about prior to COVID in Hazel Park. I have an attendance team that's made up of those people, minus students and some of the community members. But what we did with that is come up with, we have a team, we came up with a plan, and our focus is, we can't steal their title, but it's called Be a 10, because what we found out from research is for staff and students, you shouldn't be less, or you shouldn't say shouldn't, but being absent more than 10 days is an indication of someone that could potentially be struggling academically in school or would be considered chronically absent. And the same thing on the adult side as teachers and other staff. Being absent more than 10 days is 10 days that student wouldn't have an adult leading or guiding him or her in his instruction. So that's why ours was Be a 10. You wanted to be a 10, but literally have less than 10 days absent. So with that, we would devise something like that with our research, identifying the problems, coming up with solutions, and then the plan would be devised, and it would be the responsibility of those on the team to disseminate that information. And that's why it's important to have all members of the group that I listed before, because we need everyone's feet on the ground and making sure that the plan is communicated and communicated to all. You need to have posters out, posters in the community, letters need to be going out, things were on the website. Now, we were just starting to get a little bit rolling with our Be a 10 right before COVID, because we had to do all the groundwork. And all of this work, by the way, is rooted in research with Attendance Works, which is amazing, and helping school districts across the country. They have a few that they work with here in Michigan, but to get districts on track with helping to improve attendance, increasing parent and family engagement, and getting staff and students on board with improving attendance. And so with all of that said, those are the 4 goals to get to the point of looking at that data and digging in from day one of school. But these are the things that you also need to consider once that team is built, the problem is identified, and the priorities are focused on. These are the things that should be considered moving forward with that team in the school district and community as a whole. The first is improving school climate and culture. So once you have all your things identified, the work needs to be done with improving the climate and culture by making sure that there's a welcoming and inviting environment for both staff and students. Now, I have here the self-care events for staff because I had an opportunity while in Hazel Park. My first year there, as I share, I was the principal, and I was able to obtain a grant with the National Institute of Justice that ended up, it was a 5-year grant, but that's how we were able to get a full-time social worker and build like a school responder model to help us identify like social emotional issues in students that oftentimes lead to behavior, suspension, and it was a prison to pipeline. But I'm saying all that to say that during COVID, I was able to partner with them, and every Wednesday they had a self-care Wednesday for administrators. And so they were able to Zoom in if they so choose, and there were people on there to just have people have an opportunity to freely talk with other administrators that were a part of the grant across the country. And so in Michigan, it was myself, and I think it was, I can't remember the school in Wayne County, but the other school in Oakland County that was a part of the grant was Pontiac. And then we had our friends and fellows that I can call friends in New Orleans. They were a part of it. And then we had some people in Schenectady, in New York that were also a part of it. So we had an opportunity to meet on Wednesdays to kind of create that environment where similar or like-minded people, administrators, are able to meet and discuss. So you want to make sure that you have that environment for staff and students. The wellness and safety standards for staff and students are in place, emotional and physical safety. And I know that this was important, but it was lifted even more today after meeting with your students and hearing some of the concerns or just thoughts that they had to share. Wellness and safety, managing meaningful learning experiences, and when I say that, it's for staff and students. Students need to feel themselves and see themselves in the curriculum. And teachers, just because I'm over professional development, I have learned that they want to make sure their professional learning experiences are meaningful. The professional development that's coming in or going out, they want to make sure that they feel like it's something that they can take and use in the classroom the next day. You want to leverage community resources, and then the master schedule is another way, and I can talk more in detail later about advisory, but that's another way where staff and students can make that connection, where students, research has shown this, and it says it clearly that students want to come to school and they should have at least one connection to an adult, and that's what an advisory class would do. You have students, they could be in 9th grade, and they could be with Ms. Postel all the way through high school for that advisory class that could happen every day or every Wednesday for 30 minutes. And so that's what we did this year. Well, actually, we started it as a pilot during COVID, but we did that full-time this year in Hazel Park. Next is strengthening the family supports, enhancing the communication. We may have to engage with parents differently. So I have home visits and porch visits. I know this is something that we are currently talking about in Hazel Park, and we might have to reach out to families in a different way. You can't just email, and I say this all the time, or phone. People don't always communicate that way. We have to do things differently. We are in a different place, in a different space. And as I shared last week, I know that change is difficult, but this is the time. We don't have a choice, because if we're thinking that we can do things the way we were before, then we're going to get the same results, and maybe not even that, because we're not living in those times before. So we have to be willing to step outside the box. Virtual parent nights, we found, and everybody doesn't like this because it's virtual, it's not face-to-face, but we actually did find that more parents in our middle school, or our junior high, showed up for some events virtually more than they did when we had them in person. But it's a shift, but it's really a shift for what we are so used to. So we have to be willing to reach our families the way they need to be. So with that being said, again, I have leveraged community resources here because it's a little bit different when you're talking about staff and families. Pathways to potential, and then the parent university. I shared this with some staff today. This is something that I'm looking to get started in Hazel Park, and whether you select me here or there, I still hope if they're listening that this is something that they could have or someone could see it through. But I believe that having a parent university in your school is a way that we can help parents help their students. And when I talk about parent university, it's about providing resources to parents so that they can help at homework. It could potentially be applying for jobs, using a computer. We have some parents that need help with logging into MyStar. All of those things would be a part of the parent university. Next is increasing engagement, where we would celebrate attendance, since the focus is after we have this academic team or attendance team, and this is what we are focused on. Along the way, we need to celebrate those that are meeting our attendance. So one of the things that I have been thinking about in regards to this question is having a perfect attendance, not just, and it may sound corny for some, but I would like to get a certificate or a gift card, every quarter for attendance. I mean, I know that even when I was in Lance Cruz, we used to give tiles to teachers when we had a teacher of the month, and so you would get a tile to replace, like, I don't know what your building and grounds would feel like here, but they would replace this tile for you being the teacher of the month. And so that would be in your classroom and you get to keep it. That could be something for perfect attendance, but the same thing could happen for students. I believe as far as increasing engagement, it could be through different pathways. After school tutoring at varied times. And I talk with your students about this because they brought up tutoring and not having that available to them. And I shared with them where we are in Hazel Park, we had after school tutoring, but we had to shift the adults. We had it after school, that didn't work, so we had to move the times to later in the day 6 to 7 where kids would log into the Zoom and then join the tutoring. Provide incentives for students and staff, and that's kind of what I referenced before in regards to the gift cards. I don't want to speak too much on the budget, but there's also possibilities that I've seen in districts here in the state and outside of the state that staff have been rewarded financially for their attendance. And this was even before COVID, but even more so now. But that could be an incentive. I know a district right in our neighboring area that's offering that even for summer school. So those could be ways to increase staff and student engagement as far as coming to school and work. Enrollment campaigns, creating community and community-wide events. Also, since the focus is about attendance, and all of those things have to be in place as we are working to get people to want to come to school and work, these are some supports for staff and students that would need to be thought about. Making sure that you have strong foundational support, so kids that are coming to school, is the foundation strong? Next is there mentoring for students at lunchtime or adult mentors. I know that actually from L'Anse Cruz, Ferndale, even when I was at Hazel Park High School as the principal, I had a female mentoring group. And I tried to keep it when I moved into this role, but it was difficult, but I tried to do both. But having that adult mentor for students is something that kids look forward to, coming to school, because they knew we met at lunch, we met after school, we had food, I brought in speakers, we went on field trips, and so someone else could be there doing that as well. With attendance, you want to make sure there's communication home. So I have letters up here, but those letters could also be phone calls, because that's something that I have implemented now with our attendance team. We send out letters at 5, 10, 15. At 15, there's another long process because we have the Pathways to Potential in our district. I don't think you all have it because I don't remember seeing you on the list, but that's a partnership that I have with Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, where we have like caseworkers right on site, and they help us with attendance and reaching out to, like, if Carla's not here, they reach out to find out what the barriers are in my family, if I have a family, and then begin to try to help them there. I have a partnership with Graduation Alliance, where they have Engaged Michigan here, which they are also a hands-on for us in Hazel Park, and I would encourage Oak Park to think about this if you're not using it, which they also work with us. We give them a list of how many students have frequently are considered chronically absent, and they are another extension. So we may be calling and reaching out at 5, 10, and 15, but Graduation Alliance, they also reach out, and they serve as mentors with those students that are frequently or non-existent in the school. Then there is the communication piece. How will we be communicating? And this is, again, all of these things connect back to wanting, do I want to be here? Do people treat me like I want to be here? Are they vested in what I say and what I do? Do I get treated with respect? And so when we talk about communication, we have to look at what are we going to be communicating to get people to want to come to Oak Park, want to come back to Oak Park if they're enrolled but don't come. You can do that through enrollment, resources, and back-to-school events. And last, how will we communicate? Through, and I shared this a little bit earlier, you want to flood social media, letters home, also doing even, I like, but I know that this is what people like, and this is the way we have to get to people, but you can even have a Facebook Live event on your district page to get people engaged in Oak Park and wanting to come to Oak Park and wanting to, when I say come back to Oak Park, meaning literally come back, the students and those that are here come back, because you have kids, as you stated, enrolled, but they don't come. So it's a twofold thing. All of these things need to be in place as we think about it. And so with that, I think I've stayed on top of my time. I thank you for the opportunity. I may have been too fast, but I was trying to stay within my 20 minutes. If you have any questions, I am ready for them.
Well, we've got like 18 questions, so.
Oh, I thought you said 18 minutes left. I'm like, no, I'm right at 21. So.
No, we got 18 questions, so we can get started on the questions, and if there's something that, like, if we could get through this in time, if there's something left out or something you want to remind us of, with a closing statement, you can certainly do that at the end.
Thank you.
So we'll go into our first one. If you would please, tell us, how would your colleagues describe you as a leader?
So how would my colleagues describe me as a leader? I would say, so I'm going to use like some textbook terms and then in general, because, and I'm saying this just because ironically the kids had asked me, they asked me that earlier today. And so I would say that I am someone that would be considered a collaborative leader. And I say that because I believe strongly in teamwork. Everyone that's part of the team has a voice and has an expertise. And my vision is that the expectation is for you to utilize and share your knowledge and vision. You shouldn't feel muted that there's only one or two voices in the room. So I would say that. I would also say that I'm a listener. And as you know, I've said multiple times last week about communication, upfront, honest, direct communication. And I'm available and visible because as I shared last week, I meet with my administrators that I work with every other week individually, and then I also meet with them as a team in that off week.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Postel, how will you embrace the administrative team and staff who have experienced significant change and disruption over the last 2 years and give them hope for a sense of long-term stability, positive change, and strong leadership?
How would can you repeat that?
I
just
can
want to
repeat
make
it,
sure.
yes. How will you embrace the administrative team and staff who have experienced significant change and disruption over the last 2 years and give them hope for a sense of long-term stability, positive change, and strong leadership?
Well, as I just stated a minute ago, pretty much the same thing. I know that I would follow the same format, which is being visible and available for the administrators. I kind of have an open door policy. Even today, even though I was here, one of the high school principal called me with a list of questions about, which is all, if she's watching, a list of questions because we have graduation and class day and all that this week and next week coming up. So I know that I'm available and visible, and that's the same thing that I would do here. Be a listening ear, and at the same time, as I shared before, I just think it's important when you are open. And when I say open, meaning that you feel free and you create an environment where others feel free to be able to share their thoughts and concerns, I would do the same thing here. I also think it's important, as I said with the presentation, to leverage the fact that we all have experienced something that no one has experienced before. And we truly don't even know what school would be like in September or August because we've never experienced this either because we're still in the midst of COVID. So just being able to address the fact that we don't know what we don't know, and so we're going to try to move through it as best we can as a team. So I'm really big on team and voice and being available for the administrators.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My question, what is your ideal vision for an effective special education program?
So what is my ideal vision for special education?
For a special education program?
So I believe my vision for a special education programs is for all students in special education should have access to a solid general education program. They should have access to that. And I know sometimes it's controversial or people have their views, but all students in special education should have that access. They should have supports in place to help them be successful, and they should have people in place to help them navigate to the next phase if the general education class is not the best fit for them. Just from personal experience, these two things that I want to talk about, I'm not going to talk about, but say, I just think that parents and students should have a voice and part of it. If they're enrolled in special education or receive student services, they should have a voice in their schooling and what they feel like they need, and also the staff that make up special education. And I say staff because sometimes, depending on how things are structured, some staff in special education, if there's a co-teaching model, you know, and I'm just saying this because I've seen it. I think oftentimes we need some training with co-teaching. It's seen as if the co-teacher is the assistant to the teacher, when really No, both people are classroom teachers and should be working together for the planning and betterment of the students in that class. So I say, making sure that there is an understanding of the roles of the special education staff as well, and that they are respected and heard.
Good evening, Dr. Postel.
Good evening.
My question is, share how your leadership reflects knowledge and culture, competency and awareness of the need to address racial, LGBTQIA, and income inequality issues.
So, as I shared before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record because I know you all have heard this, but in my current district now, my knowledge and experience to address all of those that you mentioned is what I do every day. And even if I wouldn't say just in Hazel Park, but every place that I've been before. So I'm the diversity, equity, and inclusion leader in Hazel Park right now. And so I'm spearheading that work. And I'm very passionate about it just because oftentimes every place that I work, I'm one of those people that probably checks off that box. So I'm passionate about it. And I make sure that the work is done. So much that we've partnered with the Midwest Equity Center. We've been with them for the last 2 years. And we're in the cohort now with Ferndale and Farmington here in Michigan. And then we have our other colleagues from other Midwest states. But they are helping guide our work as we research and learn more about equitable curriculum. We just went through the process of understanding surveys that we've distributed to now administrators, students, and staff, and next will be parents, to gather their feedback about the equitable practices in Hazel Park. We also are partnered with Hanover, and they're kind of like gathering the same work, but they're using our data our actual data, like academic and behavior data, but also they did surveys at the beginning of this year. So we're going to use all of those things to come up with our equity plan that will highlight the 3 things that we need to work on. So when you ask about my knowledge and practice with it, that's what I live and do every day, in addition to the curriculum and teacher professional development. Making sure that we try our best. When I say we, even though I'm leading, we have a diversity, equity, inclusion leadership team, but we are doing our best to provide equitable practices for all students and staff in Hazel Park. And so that's the same thing that I would do here.
Thank you.
Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening.
Describe your experience with implementing budget reductions. What was your approach and how was it successful?
So my experience with budget reductions and my approach, as I mentioned last week, and I'll share again, we operate as a team, the cabinet. You know, it's a small team, but our cabinet team, looking at the budget and developing and building the budget. And so what we did specifically, as I shared before, Hazel Park was $8 million in deficit, $49 million budget, $8 million in deficit. We're no longer in deficit. So I can't say that what has been done there works. Okay, so with that budget reduction, when we came in, what we had to do is look, and we recently had to do it again, but look line by line, coming in new to the district at the different things that were listed as money going out. And what we found are 2 things that I'm going to just highlight here that oftentimes I feel like I learned through this process of us working together, because I was on the other side sometimes as the classroom teacher or administrator doing this, that some of the contracts and things like that we had in place were things that could have been, I hate to use the word cut, but those are the things that we had to cut in order to make reductions in the budget, because we could have used that money or got that same service in another way that was a lot less. The other thing that was a big highlight that oftentimes, and I think I said it to this group, after today with 5 groups, I don't know if it was here or you guys last week, to be honest with you, but I mean, this is so small, but it's huge, that we realize that, say, for example, you're in the elementary, I'm at the high school, but I'm ordering in bulk for my school, all the pencils and pens and construction paper and all the stuff for the wall, but you're doing the same thing. Really, that's not a savings. But if I know what you want, what I need, what you need, and we can order it in bulk, but it requires planning and preparation, and you have to meet the deadline to get your orders in, that was a way that we could have also cut. So I know that we made cuts. When I say cuts, we saved, that's a better way, with the contracts in particular with our copying machines and things like that. And then we also cut/save when we decided, or we moved to the bulk ordering. So that's what we do now. It's no longer, it's not to say people can't order their pens or pencils if you run short during the year, but nobody's ordering individually. But those are two things that are easy, that oftentimes you just feel like, oh, we already have a contract with this, so we're just gonna keep going. You just continue to renew and don't look elsewhere to see if you could possibly get that same service for less. So doing that line by line view allowed for us to do that in the beginning. And then, so that was what we did as a cabinet, and then we were faced with a potential that we thought we were in a bigger deficit, like midway through our deficit elimination plan. And so what we brought in was stakeholders from community, obviously the board was there, and other staff, where we had to actually talk about our wants and needs, right? And looking at what is it that we really want, and what is it that you could be without, because those things may have had to be on the cut list in order for us to meet our goal every year to get to the place where Hazel Park is now, which is not in deficit. So those are two ways that I've had experience with budget reduction. To answer your question.
Yes,
Thank you.
Dr. Bostel,
Good evening.
good evening. Working with people from different backgrounds and cultures can present opportunities as well as challenges. Please share your perspective on both.
So, similar to what I said before, I mean, kind of what you just said is key, that both having different cultural backgrounds can present challenges and experiences. And I just believe in this day and age, in this space, whether it's in this case it's education, but wherever it is our responsibility, it will be for mine to make sure that we present an environment where all feel welcome and wanted, regardless of the difference of background. And as I shared before, just from my own personal experience, I oftentimes was the person that may have been of the different background. And so it was challenging for me because I was always the one having to change or adjust to meet the bigger group. So because of that, it has always been my goal, and even now more so than ever, to make sure if I'm in the place, I want to make sure I create a space where all feel welcome and wanted and heard. Because I just know from my own personal experience how important that was for me. So I know how important it is from someone else. So that's from my personal experience and for what I do every day as an educator, making sure that staff and students. And I mean, funny is that I recently went to go visit Romeo schools because they have for NGL, like career academies, just because I was looking at it for Hazel Park. And one of my former coworkers actually is leading the program. And a similar question, I'm not going to get into details, came up because of something that was going on there. And he kind of made the comment, like, that's one thing about Postel, if it's some wrongs, she's going to make them right. I was like, you are definitely right about that. I'm going to speak up about, if I feel like, because sometimes people don't know. And I feel like if I recognize that there's something that's not being treated, someone is not being treated right, or a group, then I feel like it's my responsibility to speak up about it, because sometimes that was me and people didn't speak up for me. So I want to make sure that I'm that person.
Thank you.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
What specific strategies have you employed to show gratitude and appreciation, helping your people feel valued and connected? How have they worked, and what have you learned?
So strategies of appreciation to make staff feel valued and appreciated. So I'll talk about this year in particular, just because we all know it was a year like no other, right? And I was allowed, if she's watching, to come up with the theme for this. I'm gonna say allowed like that, but I came up with the theme for the focus in Hazel Park this year, which was building inclusive communities. And so with that, that was one way to kick off the year, letting everyone know that the focus is whoever and whatever you are, your place is here in Hazel Park. And then my superintendent had a charge of, we focused on positive psychology. And so every month we had a different focus, hope, kindness, all of those things every month. And everyone kind of had a quote or the same quote on their billboard. And we did different things for each other. You might have, like, everyone knows that I like Twix, which I now it's too much because I was getting too many Twix. But we filled out a sheet to kind of highlight the different things that we wanted. And so from the administrative team, like our cabinet team, we did that, but then within the buildings, the administrators did that with their teachers. So that was one thing that from within your own little group that you got a sense of, gratitude and appreciation. Coming into the year, we had that tone set, but it has continued out. Like I said, way too many Twix, but we have continued that throughout. And at the beginning of the year, and I actually shared this with the teachers group this year, is that to kick off the year, just to go along with building inclusive communities and, making people have high spirits, considering we all went into something that we knew not. It's like walking into something and you have no idea what's going to happen. I'm not sure if anybody in here or any of you have heard of Eddie B, the comedian that used to be a teacher and now so I was able to get him to kind of zoom in and pop in. He did comedy for the teachers. They loved it. That was our welcome back kind of PD. He welcomed us back to the year, made people laugh. It was on Zoom, and so everybody kind of zoomed in. And that was a way we kind of kicked off the year with fun and excitement before we kind of shifted gears to focus on what our 3 focus areas were for the year. And so having that overarching theme, and every year we focus on a different kind of like, I don't want to say it's not an emotion, but a different positive way of looking at life, gratitude, things like that, and having activities that you did for your peers. You just pick random colleagues. That was a way that we created, and I felt like created appreciation for staff, top to bottom.
Please describe your experience with driving student academic growth. How did you determine the goals, and how did you get your staff on board?
So experience with academic growth and getting staff on board. Okay. I think I will share with you, just because I'll share with you our math, but across the board we're in this place, but at our K-5 level, we have been following our data and had not been making the academic gains that we wished for. And prior to me coming, they were already using a math series, and when I say that, it's like the textbook that complements the units of study. And looking at the data, it wasn't moving. So this was an opportunity because the contract or subscription, however you'd like to look at it, was coming to an end. So and by the way, academic growth, I just want to kind of highlight, that's like my number one, even though I have a lot of other things, that is my ultimate responsibility currently. But thinking about the academic growth and getting staff on board, what we had to do was to determine, are we going to keep using the same thing that we have been using, but we see it hasn't made the academic gains, or do something new? So the decision was made to do something new, and what was decided was, it was an open door call, or all call for K-5 teachers that wanted to be involved with identifying the next math resource that we were going to use in Hazel Park to complement our units of study. So I had an all call, I got back interest, and then that was considered our pilot team. And what we did, and so that was my way of getting people on board. No one was shut out. Everyone had a voice, or had an opportunity to have a voice in this work. And what we did as a team, once those that were on board, although I will say I was strategic, I wanted to make sure we had representation from each grade. So sometimes, I'm not going to say it was easy. I had to maybe like, hey, you sure you don't want to, you want to be a part? We need this grade. But we were able to get the team together. We looked at several resources. We used a protocol, a math protocol, to help us identify what resource we're going to use. We also worked with Oakland Schools. One of the consultants there helped guide our work too with identifying the resource that we piloted, and we ended up adopting. And unfortunately, we adopted the year that we were adopting it, and it was going to be full implementation, was the year COVID happened. So it was kind of like a pause, and the next year, which was last year, I always call it, I called it the reboot or remix, because we had to kind of do over what we did. But essentially, it was looking at the data as far as looking at academic growth that needed and getting people on board. The data spoke for itself. What we were using did not and was not helping move the scores forward. So what are we gonna do to move it forward, and do you wanna be a part? Everyone had an opportunity. Those that had interest got on board, not saying the others weren't on board, but they got on board with identifying the resource that we identified and selected. And that group went through, what I had them go through was a training where they were kind of like train the trainer. So you would have been fourth grade, you would have been fifth grade. Those, you were the key point, or you are now the key point for our new K-5 investigations math for the district. You got trained in that way so that you would be the resource for students. And so that's what I did, looking at and knowing that academic growth needed to take place in math, saw that it wasn't happening with what we were using, and moved forward with identifying something new, and making sure that staff were trained, had the proper resources. And now this is our kind of first full year of implementation, although we still experience COVID, but this was like the real first year where we started in classrooms using it and not virtually. Okay,
Dr. Postel.
yes.
Competition to traditional public schools in the form of schools of choice, charter schools, private schools, and virtual programs has increased dramatically. How do you envision improving our brand so that more families within our district boundaries choose Oak Park schools? And I can repeat that if you need me to.
The last part was, how do I envision improving the brand of Oak Park, right?
District boundaries of Oak Park schools.
So that came up a lot today in my different stakeholder groups. So, and with that, because I share with them, and I've had a lot of opportunity even prior to that to think about it, I shared this with all of the groups because it came up with most, that I believe one of the first things that could and should be done, I mean, not just of me even being here, there's a lot of great things that are already going on, and it would be, you need to pump those things up. So immediate things would be highlight what you have going on right now. I mean, you can put, I know you have some things on your website, but you want to make sure you put them on your website, put them on Facebook, put them on all other social media outlets. And when I'm saying immediate, meaning between now and the beginning of school, if you're looking, and the goal is to increase student enrollment, you want to get those things out there. You want to, and I'm not sure how people feel about radio and TV, but I know I hear those other schools and I share with the students. I don't live too far from here, and I get a ton of districts that aren't in the district that I live in about, come to this school, come to my school. Those are things that you want to be able to do and put out there as well to get people attracted to what you have going on now. So immediately is looking at what is it that you have going on now and shouting it out across the airwaves to get people to come in. In the meantime, once school starts, or if I'm in this position, what I would do is be out there, boots on the ground, and being visible and making sure, and I made it clear with the staff and students, it's not just a one-person me thing. I need, you need a team. People should be on board, because if you're in it to make the changes, then you need to be in it working to make the changes, in my opinion. And so what I said about changing the brand or changing the image, because that's something that the kids talked about. I believe that you want to make sure that at the elementary and the middle school levels that you have strong curriculum in place. As I just talked about, us having to change that curriculum in elementary, you want to make sure that you have those in place, that you have strong athletics and your band. I know even where I am now, our goal in Hazel Park is to grow the middle school band, or to grow, not middle school, elementary band, to feed into our middle school band, because the middle school band is good, but it's like going down at one level to build them up, So you want to put those things in place. And just being frank, talking with the students, and even in my own opinion, considering some things that recently happened, you want to begin to change the image or rebrand. I don't want to say change, but rebrand the image of the high school. Thinking about, what things do you have going on, highlight those, but then making sure that you're working too. They talked about, which I talked about before, improving the classes for those that want to be college ready, having those AP courses and dual enrollment opportunities. It's not that you can't do it, that's open to everyone. So everyone should have that opportunity if that's your interest, and I believe everyone should have AP. And truthfully, and I shared this today, like, well, I don't think we got to this point, but in my mind, I'm thinking about what is the curriculum at the secondary level? Where do our kids even taking algebra at 8th grade? Because the reality is, if you're not at 8th grade, you're already behind. In a sense, if you're looking to go to college, if you're not in algebra in 8th grade, by the time you get to 12th grade, you're not where some of your peers will be when you go to college. That's not to say that you can't do it, because I didn't take algebra in 8th grade, but the way the schools are structured now and how competitive things are, those are the things that you need to be thinking about. But it also needs to be opportunities for career readiness as well. Those students that may want to go right into the world of work, building those programs right on site. And I have the experience, as I shared before, I'm not going to rehash those things with you, but I know that those things are possible. Forming partnerships with the businesses that you have in the community. I think I remember hearing when I looked at one of those meetings, someone came to the podium and mentioned that they were part of one of the unions. That's like a connection right there. Was that you? But I mean, really, listen, that's a connection right there on site to be able to have someone work with your student. That's what I did in order for us to get welding. And next year, they're going to have machines in Hazel Park. It's someone, a Hazel Parker, that's a machinist that's going to be working there. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, because you have to go through the process, and the classes have to be approved if you want it to be an MDE approved career course. You can teach the course, but you have to know that you're going to be funding that on your own outside of CTE dollars. But the smart thing to do would be going through the process to get the course, approved in the right way. But it's just about looking at immediately what you have and shouting it to the sky, and then working inside to build and grow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Purcell, what is the biggest crisis you have handled? What did you do to help resolve it? And what did you learn from it?
Could you repeat that? The biggest what? No?
What is the biggest crisis you have had to handle? What did you do to help resolve it? And what did you do to learn from it?
So when you talk about crisis, the biggest crisis, unfortunately, when I think of crisis, I've had kind of, I don't want to say too many, but I've had a few that are really unfortunate. And early in my career as an administrator, one of the biggest crises that I had was the loss of life of a student at the student's own hands. And that is one of the biggest, because it was early on, without giving too many identifiers as districts and stuff like that. I was a relatively new administrator. And that was information that say someone was in school, and before we came back to school the next day, that information was shared with it early in the school hours, like kind of before I would get there where I was. We started school much earlier than even where I am now. So it was a community where everybody knew everybody, probably similar to this. So before we even got to school, people had already known, the law enforcement was involved. And so it was the way the school was structured. There was a campus principal, and then I was an administrator, but I kind of still had my own staff. And so I had to be the person to kind of gather the staff together to make sure that all staff knew what had happened. So I had to share that news with the staff and actually talk about, the crisis, and that we were going to be in crisis mode at that moment, because some of the staff actually were from the community and lived in the community. So they were already aware before we even got to school of what had taken place. And so just me having to be the calm in the midst of the storm and guiding the staff through the process of how we needed to be strong and available for our students, even though we had a crisis management team, but having to make the staff aware of what took place, and then having to talk about, as that small staff, how we were going to address the students. But from that experience, ever since then, it's just always, I personally always make it a point that whenever I feel like staff or students, because in my time I have had staff, I've had an adult experience similar to that too, but because of that, it's just always important to me to make sure that the schools or the districts have in place resources or people right on site to be able to help people. It's not just students, but staff, because we have our adults also have social emotional issues or needs as well, but available. So where I am currently, when I was in Ypsilanti and L'Anse Creuse, we had actual medical staff on site in addition to our school staff to be able to refer students, or staff would be able to get that assistance that they needed to prevent something like that would happen. So that was the biggest crisis when I think, because that was the first, one of the early things that I experienced as a new administrator. Right in my role as administrator, literally early in my years of administration, but early into the school year as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Dr.
The question that I have is, what data should be collecting on possible learning lost during COVID? If we see difficulties, how would we wouldn't it be the remedy then? Oh, maybe I'm thinking it's written wrong, but it could
Okay.
be. If we see, let me start all over from the beginning. What data should we be collecting on possible learning loss during COVID? If we see difficulties, how would we start to remedy them?
If we see deficits, how will we start to remedy them?
Okay,
Oh, that's why I was confused.
It's all good.
My bad, thank you.
so
I said difficulties.
what data should be collected on learning loss from COVID, and then how would we remedy them if we see shortfalls? Okay. So one of the things data that should be collected, considering what we've all experienced, number one, the first thing you want to make sure you're collecting is academic data. So hopefully you kind of have processes in place, like we use iReady data. We're currently using that. We have been using it before COVID or pre-COVID, but you want to have academic data, you want to have behavioral data. And when I talk about, I just want to highlight or say where I am now, we're using iReady K8. And one of the things when we looked at academic data, or we have been, because we have data meetings once a month at the secondary level, we've been looking at classes passed. Simply just looking at classes taken and the classes passed. And again, we work this, well, I'm not going to go into that part, but that's what we're using. So we say academic data, behavior data is important to be look at. I would say culture data. We send out a survey every semester to staff where really they're pretty much giving feedback on our roles as administrators, who the person is that and it causes for us to reflect. So that's that part. For some people, I'm okay with it because I like to know what people think, but that requires that tough skin a little bit to be able to take feedback from others. But the cultural data is important. It's not just from staff. Students have those surveys that are being given too. We also have, I think, social emotional survey, but we also have that in place. But all of those things are, I believe, data that you should be collecting if you're wanting to understand what has happened due to the loss because of COVID. And to remedy that is that once you see the data, if you're looking at it, then you should begin to be putting supports in place to address where you see deficits. So I would just say, for example, if you see that in October you gave a survey and kids were feeling a certain way about becoming to school afraid, worried about am I going to get COVID? Because we came back and people weren't wearing masks, and maybe some people felt like, even though I have on a mask, my neighbor doesn't. Am I going to get COVID? Is the air ventilation, good in the building or stuff like that? That's an indication that, hey, if you only have one counselor or two counselors and one social worker or a half-time social worker, that you may need to increase that support help in your district, or in this case, I'm just giving an example of a high school in your building. So you want to look at the data and then begin to fill the gaps that you see in the data with the supports that need to be put in place. If you see there's a deficit in math or ELA, that's where you may want to have another support teacher added to the roster, or maybe reshape someone's role to be able to fill the gaps that you have in place.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay. Dr. Purcell, how would you advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly with those who may not understand or value its relevance and importance?
So I would, again, I'm passionate about that, and I would advocate the same way that I do now by being that voice, making sure that we're doing all that we can to address the diversity that makes up the district, not just in staff, but in students. And so, as I stated earlier, I would first make sure that we are getting trained or building the knowledge of the staff, because as you stated, and as we all know, that everyone is not necessarily on board because it's something different. And if it's different, everybody's not okay or welcoming to that. But it would be my responsibility in this role as superintendent, and even in my current role, with that responsibility, is to make sure we are educating our staff, board, and community by having meetings to get people to understand the importance of diversity, of what it truly means. And it's not always just race. Oftentimes that's what we hear, but truly getting people to understand. And I can just give an example of in Hazel Park, and even when I was in Las Cruz, we have, prior to COVID, I had built for the administrators, we did a series the year before COVID. It kind of went into COVID on anti-racist leadership. Last Thursday, we just finished this year's series on culturally responsive or culturally proficient leadership for administrators. We started a little bit before COVID, and some during online learning, culturally responsive teaching for staff. The year before COVID, we also had DEI opportunities for community members to come in to understand. It's about informing people, making them aware, because a lot of times people are afraid or don't like something because they don't know. So it's my job to make sure that people are, number one, the first aware, and providing those opportunities for people to learn. So that's how I would advocate, is providing those learning opportunities, and then making sure that you have policies after that, or it's not really after, it's while you're learning. Begin to look at your policies and practices to make sure they are such that they are welcoming to all. Because I feel like, actually, it's not a feel, I know that if and when people take time to dig into their policies, sometimes things may not be in place that's really welcoming for all. So you have to look at the policies that you have in place, like literally the school board policies and dress code policies and things like that, and then some of the practices that may be taking place in your schools to make sure that you're truly advocating for all. So that's where you're welcome. Thank you.
Dr. Postel, what strategies would you utilize to recruit and retain top talent for our teaching, administrative, and support staff?
Strategies to, it was recruit
and retain
and
top
retain.
talent.
That was it. We talked about that earlier today too. But some strategies that I would do to recruit and retain, and that's in working with, the cabinet team and human resources, or however that's structured, is making sure with the recruitment piece, because of the shortage, it's not tricky, but you really, similar to what I said about building up the image and getting people to come back, it's almost like we have to do that with teaching. Build it up to get people wanting to apply and be the teacher. So you want to make sure that you're promoting your positions everywhere and anywhere possible. So on the job sites, online, using the Oakland schools, using all of the other places possible, connecting with universities, in-state and out-of-state. And as I shared before, I know we talked about this a little bit last week, everyone is not welcoming to some of the laws that have changed that will allow people to become certified teachers in alternative ways. You have to utilize that option in order to be able to recruit teachers. When I say utilize that option, it's similar to like what we just talked about as far as bringing people in from business or industry and having them be classroom teachers. Or if you went to school and you have math or science as your major or your degree, there is an alternative way now with the laws that have changed for you to become a classroom teacher. Now, I will say this, although you didn't ask, I do think when you start to do that, we begin to need to think about how you're going to professionally develop or train those people because they didn't necessarily go to school. I went to school for math, not to work with sixth graders. So you have to make sure you have supports in place to wrap your arms around someone that came from being an accountant and now they're going to be working with high schoolers in an accounting class. It can be done, but they are going to need different supports. So those are some ways that I feel like I would recruit. As far as retaining, the number one thing is that relationship piece, which I know I talked about last week and again today. You want to make sure that you build solid relationships where people feel like I'm wanted, I'm heard, and valued when I come to work. I mean, I know I want to feel that way, so I can't imagine other people wouldn't want to wake up every day and come to a place where they spend the majority of their time either here or with their work and not feel like my voice is heard and I'm valued. So you want to make sure, you know, your environment is such as that. You also want to think about, as far as retaining, if the budget allows, offering a competitive salary. And I think it's also important to, and we are working on this in Hazel Park now, is that onboarding process, that once you get people in the door, that they feel like, okay, when I'm here and I'm ready to teach English, do I have my MyStar login? What is my email address? What is my password? Where's my room? When do I start and come? What is my lunch? Because if I'm here to teach English and then I have to try to figure out all these other things, I'm frustrated. So, and that's what I have learned, or we have learned as a team at Hazel Park, that we're working to try to make sure that once you get in the door, your job of educating students and building relationships with families and your colleagues is easy. So that is huge, because that could be frustrating. And then again, why would I want to, going back to the attendance piece, come to work if I still, on 10 weeks in, I still don't have my MyStar login and I'm using my neighbors next door. So those things are important. They seem minor, but they're important.
Please describe your experience with ensuring that top academic performers receive challenging instruction.
So top performers receive challenging
Top
instruction.
academic performers receive challenging.
So, and it was my experience with that, correct?
Yes.
So, again, with my current role being responsible for curriculum development, my experience is, as I didn't share this with you, but I did grow our AP offerings in Hazel Park. We started off with just mainly English, even though my background is English, so it's not biased in that way, but we started off with our 2 to 3 AP courses in English, and now we have them in social studies, science, and in math. And they grew from like 3 to now we have, I think, about 9 to 10, because we started a new class last year, AP offerings on site. So as far as working with the top performers, is making sure that we have those courses available and those seats filled in those high-performing classes. Now, I am a believer that everyone should have that opportunity and should be encouraged to AP courses. I know some may feel like, oh, you should have this or that, but that's us, Xing a box or checking a box for a student. Sometimes they may need to be pushed into those courses, and we need to give them that opportunity, because once we start to say, oh, you're good, but you're not good, and I've not been given an opportunity, that's kind of how we start to limit our classes and maybe not have them as full as they need to be. So offering the courses, encouraging dual enrollment, starting programming, perhaps someone of the teachers actually no, it wasn't a teacher, I think it was someone in the administration brought up their interest in middle college, which I've looked at that with my current role and then had experience with it in my previous district. We actually did have partnership with middle college, so those are opportunities that could be explored for students. But as far as boots on the ground and experience, is just growing the honors and AP courses and opportunities and connections. That has been my experience with that.
Thank you.
Dr. Postel, have you challenged an equitable school policy or practice? If so, please describe what happened. I'm sorry. Slang that way. New York twang. Excuse me. Have you challenged an inequitable school policy or practice? If so, please describe what happened.
So have I challenged an inequitable school policy or practice?
Yes.
Yes. And this is a controversial one, but it's dress code. And I say the dress code because and I say this just because coming from where I was before and even coming to Hazel Park, the dress codes were two different things, but they're the same students, all in high school. But sometimes certain rules, there are more rules oftentimes in certain schools than others. And so my big thing is looking at the dress code front, and it still is now. Actually, that's coming up on the table this week because we're looking at dress code and cell phone policy where I am now because we're making some changes to that. But my big push, and it was changed before, but some people are wanting to change it now, is to look at the dress code from the standpoint of, oftentimes we want to have this list. You can't wear this, you can't wear that, you can't wear this. And it's always, to me, you're just running a rat race of trying to keep up with the popular things that the kids wear because, they may wear baggy jeans, whatever it was then, but they don't even do that now. So you have that on the list, and it's out of style the next year. So I believe, and I always say this, that you need to focus on what is it that you can wear? What is it that we want you to come to school looking like? Change the focus so that it's positive. You want to have on, appropriate attires where your shoulders are covered, or you have on skirts that stop at whatever. I don't want to say, because that's another thing that oftentimes dress code is always geared toward young ladies. Oftentimes when you have that list, but that's a whole nother conversation. So that's why it's important to focus on what is it that you can wear? What is it that we're looking for our students to come to school dressed like? And I say that because when you dig a little bit deeper into these dress code and behavior policies and all these other, when you talk about policies, when you look at urban and suburban schools and schools with lower socioeconomic or more students of color, oftentimes it's this long list of what you can't do. But when you go further down the road, that's not necessarily the case. And in my opinion, that's some things, I'm not saying you should have no rules and just run free, but I think that's something that we need to look at and begin to shape or shift our thinking about how we approach, how we want students to show up to school. Because if we look at them or have things presented in such a way that could be seen as negative, that's the behavior you're going to get back. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent on that way, but oftentimes when you talk about policies and all those other things, it's not the same when you go to schools. And I believe sometimes when you have certain things in place, when you have that mindset about the person in front of you, that's exactly what they're going to give you. Right? So we may need to shift that. But as far as me pushing the envelope, because I know some of our board, some of the administrators and things like that, they want that long list. But like I say, you're chasing your tails because we put all these things on the list now, and come next year this time, it's a whole new style. So now we're going to redo a dress code versus just focusing on what is it that you want students to come to school presented as. So that's one that sometimes, or not even some, right now I'm getting pushback about. But we're going to come to a happy medium, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Purcell, tell us about the time your staff and community was divided on an issue and how you worked to overcome that division.
So how the staff and the community were divided on an issue and how we worked to resolve it. Correct.
Overcome things resolved.
Those have happened. I'm trying to be funny, but those happen often. So I'm trying to think. I'll talk about more recent because everyone will be able to relate. Well, I don't know if you had the same debate about back to school and masks and things like that. So that was a really big. Oh, well, I don't know because you still wear masks at the high school. We don't. So that's that was a shift for me because we're maskless. So it's funny, but that was a big debate where the community and staff were divided, which is, understandably, because, some people are making statements from a Zoom room where you're having a teacher come with your student in the class. So I can understand where people may have those views. So one of the things that was the biggest thing is, and I'll start with going back to school. going back to school, which we started, not this year, last year, we went back to school in person. And so that was a big debate, to school or no school, literally in person. And so one of the things that we actually started prior to or during COVID was a moving forward community, or I should say committee, where we had stakeholders from parents, staff, there were students on the committee, and we met every week. They still meet every other week. We meet every other week now. But the focus was to talk about, you know, our views and opinions about going back to school. Now, I will say that much of the decision was led with science, the data and science and the medical professionals versus, you know, just strictly opinion. So oftentimes that led to the decision, but how I was able to work to resolve it was being a part of that committee, and then I kind of had a subcommittee with the parents that were interested in the secondary portion, because I was responsible when we came back to school for designing the schedule of what the student schedule would look like, because we didn't have the same 1 to 6 schedule. We went to a block schedule, and that required a shift or a change that many people weren't happy with, because you were with students maybe 90 minutes and you're used to being with them for 55. So I led that part of the coming back to school, but as a larger group, we met to talk about the do's, I don't say do's and don'ts, but wants and maybe not wants of coming back to school. But the decision was made at that time to come back, and then shortly after we used the same process to determine whether or not we were going to, you know, mask or not, because the opportunity for us to still mask was there. And initially we still masked, and then eventually at the start of this school year, the decision was not to, once the county released that information. So to answer your question about the community and school divided, it was about the return to school, and once we returned, the use of masks. And the decision was made, or how the decision was made and resolved, was coming together as a group, and it was mixed stakeholders a part of that group. And I just so happened to have to pull the secondary interest people away, because that's a whole nother beast. It's not necessarily like elementary, but to decide what school was going to look like at the middle school and high school, working with that group to determine that, and that involved the union as well as board members, parents, and students to come to a consensus as to what that was going to look like in Hazel Park. So that would be my example of division, but coming to a resolution.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe this is my last question, and it is, describe how you work with the board to build consensus and carry out the goals set forth in the strategic plan. No, strategy. Strategic. I had it right. You know, I'm
Okay,
sorry
that's
to
okay.
interrupt, but last night I was watching the Billboard Awards, and they had this little lady, and every time she messed up when, I'm sorry.
Oh, are you
I
talking
know
about
I'm
the
out of
little
order,
girl
but-
from Flint?
Yeah,
I do remember that, yes.
Only reason why I brought that
She
up
did
is
do that.
because, you know, I'm just as nervous as
Said I was.
everyone probably is, but she just happened, every time she made a mistake, she laughed, and I just thought to share that, sorry.
She was
That's
actually
what-
from here, though.
Yeah,
It was
she
the
was
girl,
from
I don't know if
Flint.
anybody
Yeah.
remember the Flint water crisis, the little girl that wrote to the
Yeah.
president. She's 16 now, if anybody follow her. But yeah, she was I just happened to be flipping the channels and I saw that too. I'll just say that. But she was on there. She kept
Every time
yeah.
she made a
So
mistake.
wait, can you repeat?
No problem. It was just right on time, because every time she did, she laughed. Okay,
Yeah, I'm
so,
sorry.
describe how you work with the board to build consensus and carry out the goals set forth in the strategic plan.
Okay. So in my current role, I don't work directly. I can't go directly to the board and work, because my superintendent, that is her job and responsibility. But I'm thankful and grateful, because she oftentimes, all of us are involved in, first of all, developing and working on the strategic plan. And we actually come to it very often. If she's watching now, we just came to it now to evaluate where we are and what we have accomplished, and we had to report. We had to, and then we are again reporting, back to the board about what we have done and what we need to do to continue to move forward. If given the opportunity to be in this role as superintendent, I would think that it's important for us, which I know I've seen done before, for us to possibly have like a retreat, maybe offsite. I know that I've seen it happen, and I know that this can happen even at Oakland schools, where someone would guide us through you know, the process of the relationship of the board and the superintendent. What is our role? What is my role as superintendent? What would be your role? And kind of like having a fresh start, and I say fresh start or coming back, to, you know, what we need to do to move forward when making decisions and coming to a consensus about a topic at hand. So that would be my response to that. Thank you.
Now it's the last question.
Oh. Okay.
Number 18. Tell us about a time when you changed a process or procedure to make your department or organization more inclusive.
So I could talk, in short, I'll talk about currently now. We have like we have a hiring process. When I say hiring process, we have like questions that we ask at the screener, second round, first round, and the performance task. So we kind of have a process in place in Hazel Park. And one of the things, considering DEI is like has been a focus that we really did not have, we don't have in place, were questions to kind of gather whether or not the people we have sitting in front of us meet our expectations of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So one of the things I did to change that process is to incorporate right off in the screener process questions, asking, you know, the candidate, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? Giving an example of how that was implemented, or what experience have you had in your current role. So that's something that immediately, an immediate change, or that was like kind of, not want to say right on the spot, but last school year as we were interviewing a lot of staff during COVID, and it was all virtually, that was a change that I made to our hiring processes by asking questions in this right off. Before you even get to the second round, we're asking, you know, we have like a set 5 questions, but of those questions, now asking about DEI. So we know who and where you are and where you stand with that before we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes, ma'am. So we would like to take a few minutes now to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for the board, if you have any questions. Don't ask me if I saw that show last night.
Okay. I did write a few questions. Let me see. Because I heard so much today, and it made me think about it more. Because we talked a lot. When I say we, all of the groups seem to talk somehow about community, or, you know, wanting more things to be connected to school and the community, which is what I'm used to and kind of what I've been experienced now in my role, and even where I was before, just being connected to the community and organizations and being out there. What actual school community or organizations or groups are active actually in the district? Now I'm just curious to know what's active and available here.
Yeah. I like to start from more or less the parent perspective. In our community, you have the different areas, you know, the band parents. One of the band parents are highly engaged, and I'm quite sure you probably ran into them. You do have some of the other intramural teams that are active. I can speak from that, you know, from that aspect solely. I don't know what the other board members may have to say from that, but I feel that they're one of the most active and participating members in the organization.
Okay.
Trustee Corcoran.
I'm not sure how active, but I know they're active, but not how active, because I'm not a part of it. I don't keep up with it. But I happened to speak to one of the pastors, probably like maybe a week or so ago. But there's the Rabbi and Pastors Committee, or a group that they have.
Okay.
Well, not just the one more. The library. The
Oh,
library,
okay.
yeah, the library, they're active. They're active for a couple of reasons though, but you know, it's more positive because they want to engage, you know, with the district in regards to trying to maintain balance over at the library, because of the fact that it is a public institution, yet, you know, our children do sometimes congregate there. I mean, it's there for their use. However, you know, they
Yeah,
want
I
to be
understand.
more a part of the solution and rectify problems.
Got it. I understand.
Trustee Lunkins.
We still do. We have the peer-to-peer group.
Oh,
Oh,
peer, okay.
And I'm the one that started bringing it to Oak Park. They've been all over Oakland County, way out, and I asked to bring it to Oak Park because I lived in Oak Park and we had issues that we could have resolved. And different people would come with attorneys, social workers, different people would come each time we had our meetings here. But we haven't had any since COVID,
Oh, okay,
okay?
okay.
Trustee
Okay.
White.
And I'll just mention, obviously Michigan Works, which is.
Oh, I met that person, yeah.
Which is here, and then we have our partnership with Oak Park Youth Assistance and the Tri-Community Coalition, and Cheryl Weiss, who actually is president of the Oak Park Youth
So you have
Assistance,
it.
has also been very active in the last few weeks, reaching out to alumni of Oak Park and getting them engaged as well.
Okay.
I believe that we have resources available that are stagnant for whatever reason, that they need encouragement within the community to resurrect themselves, the booster clubs.
Okay.
I think that's very important. We no longer have an orchestra. I think that's a part of the music program, and families and parents to be a part of that, to be inclusive. A theater group, we have a marvelous instructor, and I'm sure you are aware of the person from being in Oak Park at one time that does wonderful things for young people. So there's much, but I think we can be an added assistance for all of these. Youth assistance is, of course, from the circuit court as well, and that's been in the community for a long time, and it's good, it's worthy. And of course, our working with our cooperation of our public safety and the director of public safety and his team, that they know our students and the students know them and have faith in them. They've been on the force for a long time, and they work with young people well, whether they're elementary or junior high, and it works. The function is good, and the attitude and the experience for all is good.
Thank you.
So we have just a few minutes left. Would you like to make any closing remarks?
I'd just like to thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight and last week as well. I had a great time and experience today meeting all the stakeholder groups. We talked about a lot of the things, ironically, that you brought up. Today. So again, I would just love the opportunity to come back to a place to kind of help give me my start. So I hope you have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Pastor.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
We're gonna give Dr. Postel, we sincerely appreciate your time and continued interest in being the next superintendent of Oak Park Schools. We'll keep you informed and expect to be prepared to make our final determination on Tuesday, May 31st.
Okay, sounds
So thank you for being here with us today, much appreciated.
Thank you.
We're getting ready to go into public comment, so if there are people who want to make a comment, please fill out a public comment card. I want to once again encourage everyone to give us feedback on our website. You can go on our website to give us feedback, or use the half sheet of paper in the back of the room, the QR code, use your camera function, and you should be able to provide feedback in that way as well. Okay, we've come to the part of the meeting where the public has an opportunity to comment to the board and to address the board, with the understanding that the board cannot comment back. And so if Trustee Smith, if you would please provide the public comment guidelines.
Because the Oak Park Board of Education values public meetings, not just meetings in public. We welcome public comment on school issues. Speakers are asked to express themselves in a civil manner with due process for the dignity and privacy of others who may be affected by public comment. The public comment portion of the meeting cannot be used to make personal attacks against a school board member or a school district employee that disrupts the order of the meeting and are totally unrelated to the manner in which the member or employee performs his or her duties. Speakers should be aware that if statements violate the rights of others under the law of defamation or invasion of privacy, such comments may result in legal liability. Most comments can be concisely stated in 3 minutes, and the board respectfully asks that comments remain focused on the topic or issue and not be directed at specific personnel or board members.
We have any cards?
Yes. First, we have Crystal Bailey at 8646 Kimberton Drive.
Okay. Good evening, Ms. Bailey.
Good evening. I'm a community leader and alumni of Oak Park Board of Education, a stakeholder, former vice president of Board of Education, and a student of Dr. Postel. She was my 10th grade English teacher, as I mentioned previously. I have been watching and very engaged with the superintendent search. And what I've been hearing from her is growth, build, and include over and over and over. I think she may have mentioned it, and every answer to these questions is build, communicate, grow, include. And that's exactly what we need in a superintendent who will lead us. I did go to the 4:30 community meeting, and no one was there, unfortunately. It was in a media center, and community members and parents were able to come and give their input, and no one was there. I think that is, disheartening for the community leaders because they would like to give their input as well as I. Today at 7 o'clock, same time as this meeting, we have a city council meeting. So unfortunately, you can't be at both, and this is very, very important to be at, and there are some important things happening with our city as well that we need to be at. I don't know if I mentioned, but I was a candidate for mayor of Oak Park, and I ran this past November. So I am very involved in the community. As I mentioned, I am a community leader. Also, being a former board member, I don't know how many ESL students we have within the district, but that was a really good question because I know that the other candidates highly certified in ESL, English as a second language, and I'm not sure how many students in our district that would benefit from that. And I think that was all that I have. But again, Dr. Postel mentioned her partnerships with Graduation Alliance and Oakland Schools. Was that my 3 minutes?
No, you're good.
Okay. So, but
That would be my phone. You're
okay.
good.
Okay. And just to wrap it up, I also helped with the strategic plan of our district as well as our vision and mission statement. So I think Dr. Postel is what the district needs. I think her leadership is phenomenal. I was a 10th grader here, and she was my English teacher, and English got that much more exciting for me. So I hope that the students would be even more engaged after having her leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next. Okay, we have Mr. Curtis Daniels at 23487 Park Lawn.
Mr. Daniels.
Good evening, y'all.
Always trying to get here on time. It was a little late. I'm hearing some very, very positive things and some very, very serious things that we should take a look at. So, again, I've been coming. I'm gonna keep coming. I'm gonna keep promoting skilled trades. I also been bringing material here for ones to take a look at for our apprenticeship program we have in Detroit. That's also is open to the Oak Park residents and the children. Ones that's getting out of school, ones not having an opportunity to go to college where they can also get into the skilled trades program. So I've been bringing materials so it can enlighten you on what's going on with the skilled trades. And I want y'all to really take into consideration now, whoever we have as our chosen superintendent for this district, that be fostered amongst the children and ones that's in school and the adults as well, you know, parents too, you know. It's not too late to get a trade for no one, you know, there's no age limits to that. So again, I'm gonna keep bringing materials. I hope y'all review those materials I'll be bringing. It's coming, it's a statewide programs that's going on with the skilled trades. That is a main topic. It's a lot of construction going on, a lot of jobs going on. Oak Park, there's few of them around about 9 Mile. Clark Construction is really making their way through here. It's a school they building up over here off of 9 Mile. So I would like to see a lot of the Oak Park children that's coming out of high school and coming out of school to get these skilled trades and get some of these jobs that's going to be paying from $80,000 to $100,000 to $200,000 a year. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay. So I don't chop the name up, I'm gonna say T. Parker at 24200 Church.
Ms. Parker?
Thank
welcome.
you. Good evening, I'm Dr. Tyloa Parker. I come to you, Tyloa. I come to you as a proud product of Oak Park Schools and an educator myself. I stand before you to offer high commendation for Dr. Carla Postel. When you speak of a leader that is going to push this district in a positive trajectory, I believe Dr. Postel would be the one you should strongly consider. When I reflect on those who has made an impact on where I have come today, I must mention those such as Dr. Carol Johnson, Miss Akia Murphy, Miss Regina Greer, Mr. Donald Didlake, Mr. Stan Trumpeter, Dr. Davida Colbert, Dr. Joanne Wright, Miss Charity Jones, Miss Lisa Williams, Mr. Robert Lichman, Mr. Joel Saccone, Dr. Sandra Harris, and certainly Dr. Carla Postel, my class advisor when I was in high school, who went and continues to go above and beyond. She shows up. I can attest what Dr. Postel has shared with us today are not just statements, but actions. Personally, she has supported me years after my graduation from Oak Park High School, as well as my classmates. Upon reviewing what the district highlighted in the superintendent candidate profile that the district is in search of, I can tell you, you have the person before you this evening. She has an incredible resume and a wealth of experience that would be prudent and a gift to this district. So not to take up too much additional time, as a stakeholder of this district, as an alumni and community member, I ask that you strongly consider Dr. Carla Postel as this district's comeback to be our next superintendent for Oak Park Schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We have Pamela Larkin at 5590 Tedworth, please.
Mine isn't so structured. So I'm an Oak Park alumni, and I've worked for Oak Park School District for over 25 years. I started at Lessinger in the lunchroom and worked in athletic department, principal secretary, dean of students, secretary. So I had a great life at Oak Park. And one of the nicest, most educated women is Dr. Postel, who's Carla. I call her Carla. So I've worked with her for many years. I don't even know how many years. But she's always been a genuine person. She receives much respect from students and staff, that I know for sure. She used to show up to all or most of the games, athletic. I should have thought about this before I came up here. She was always present at football games, volleyball games. I was the tennis coach. She would show up to the tennis game matches and just support the students. Very supportive. She volunteered. I was in charge of fundraising at the high school. We sent the Pomerets to different to Florida, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah, we fundraised so much for all of the athletic teams. And Carla always was a big supporter of that. She was a class sponsor, which you already said, and the kids still boast about her, how great that year was. And like I said, she was always helping with fundraising. So not like I'm like the greatest person, but she is my total recommendation.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Doing poetry tonight. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board who has not yet filled out a card? I just want to make sure we get everyone. No? Okay. Is there anything from the board, any communications from the board?
I have one thing to say.
Trustee Corcoran?
I just have one thing to say in regards to, we have a community member here tonight that has been consistent with bringing forth the career readiness for our students. I encourage our community, if you are, in that career, to bring your information to the board and discuss it with the community, because I'm not sure what day that we will be having Career Day, but if there isn't, or if there will be in the future a Career Day, I find that it's more feasible to come and bring it forth to the board, so that way that the community will be able to engage or experience what you have for the students to follow up with. That's it.
Thank you. Trustee Lunkins?
Only a short one. I am running for board.
Okay. Trustee Smith?
Yeah. I just wanted to put out there, I want to, and I implore and encourage your community, parents, alumni to participate with the eye care volunteer effort that we have going on in Oak Park schools. It's a value add, because the fact that not only are you assisting the school district in, protecting and keeping order in regard to this district, during dismissal and when kids are entering in the schools. But you get a chance to meet the staff, talk with the kids, and there's a lot of things you can learn about what they want, and just to be a value add and mentor. It's almost like a mentoring effort as well. So I just want to just keep reminding the community that that opportunity is available. Thank you.
Trustee Smith? I got one other thing. I'm not gonna forget you.
All right.
Really quick, two things. I see a lot of passion in here today, and we've heard from some of our stakeholders. It would be great if everyone would at least please go on the website, take the opportunity to fill out the form, to let us know your thoughts on this search, as well as, or either that or use the QR code in the back of the room to go to the same site so you can let us know your thoughts on the superintendent search. That would be very helpful. One other matter is that there is a Juneteenth essay contest coming up with the deadline of submission for May 24th. High school students who are Oak Park residents or Oak Park high school students have the opportunity to earn $1,000 if they win the essay contest. Middle school, $500. Elementary school, Chromebook. So to all my teachers in the Oak Park School District who teach English, please get your students involved. The May 24th is the deadline. If there are any questions, please submit those questions to, or actually the submissions, go to Courtney Flynn, CFLYNN at oakparkmi.gov. If there are submissions for that essay contest, it's a great opportunity to talk about, to encourage diversity and inclusion. We heard about that around the world and within our communities relative to the Juneteenth holiday. So just want to put that out there. John, you're up.
All right. So,
Site visits. So next week, last step in the process, right? You got your second interview coming up on Wednesday. Last step is site visits. So what we need to nail down is which board members will be participating, preferably same 3 board members for both site visits. And we need to get a date or dates and time frame set. And we need to do that so that I can inform the candidates and they can begin planning this for next week and be ready.
Do we have board members who are available to go on the site visit? You are available?
What's the time though?
We have to pick the dates.
It'll be during the course of the school day, so it would be like a 3 to 4 hour time block between 9 and 4 roughly. You can pick that, and once you determine who's going and what dates.
The 3 to 4 hour time block, you're available to do that? Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm available, but if we don't know the day of the week, I guess I can, once we learn that, I can do it, but, you know,
Should I write you down, or should I put you like?
put me like a
Maybe.
question, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. Anyone else able to trust
I'm
you?
available Thursday. I'm not available Monday or Tuesday. I'm available Thursday and I'm available in the afternoon. Right. Wednesday, I would be available after 2. So that might not.
Probably
And then I could be available on Friday.
So Thursday and Friday, that's all right?
That's my scheduled
Can we see if we can make that work?
Next week, Thursday and Friday,
Correct.
and it would be which members then, Mr.?
We have 2 and a possible third, it sounds like we're playing space, but we have 2 and a possible.
Would that work for you, Ms. Corcoran,
Yes.
Thursday and Friday?
Thursday and Friday, both the days, and what's the time?
Well, you tell me, so
Oh,
if
okay,
we're gonna
cool.
use those 2
Yep.
days,
That's good, I can do it.
give
Monday,
me a 4-hour block of time, where you could be as early as like 9 to 1,
Yeah, okay.
10 to 2. You tell me what's gonna work.
So you're available all day for both, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you're
I'm matching-
available?
I'm matching,
Okay,
yeah.
so why don't we plan around them, and if, unless you have
Well, she's
specific
saying she
time.
Well, I can do it, long as it's before 2 o'clock, so, yeah, that's
So you
fine.
could
You wanna say 10 to 2?
Yep, 10 to 2.
10 to 2 would work on both days if you can pull that off. That would be great, and then Dawn can participate on both.
So next week, Thursday, Friday, 10 to 2. So I'll get in touch with the candidates, I'll get back with you and let you know specifically which day would be for which person. I'm gonna get the candidates then to share their itinerary too, that'll take them a few days, but once I get that, and I'll share that with everybody so you all know what's going on, but then specifically the 3 of you who are going will have that in hand, and I typically ask them to provide directions where to park, where to enter the building, so just know you'll be getting all of that,
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
all right?
What else you got?
That's it?
That was easy.
I
Okay,
know, not
I'm
bad.
sorry, could we do 9 to 1? Would that be?
that's too, I'm
That's
not
good.
a morning person, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
How about 10:30?
Are you
struggle.
kidding me?
I
10
struggle
to 2
getting
is
up,
fine.
because I work midnight, so, you know.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. If nothing else, is there anything else from the board? Hearing none, the time is 8:48. If there are no objections, we will adjourn by unanimous consent.
Next meeting.
You don't let me.
Sorry.
Is there an objection to adjourning by unanimous consent?
Support.
Thank you. Hearing none, we are hereby adjourned 8:48. Thank you.